Hey guys, in this video I'm going to be sharing my new and updated builds for the Tempest class that I like to use, and I'm going to be going over the open world farming, dungeons, raids, and also the top DPS build which I managed to get for Tempest. And as you can see now, I wanted to start off this video straight away by showing the 1 minute damage test for the Solo DPS build which I like to use. And in terms of damage output, this is actually a very strong build and manages to maintain almost 7 million DPS per second for me, and I'm sure with even more optimal gem setup you guys will be able to push even higher, maybe 500 million or 600 million for a minute. But as you can see here, I'm roughly halfway through the damage test and I have almost 300 million total damage, which is really crazy. I know that this has been a highly requested video, but I really wanted to take my time and test out all of the new essence and different combinations just to find out what works the best. So if you do like this type of content, then please consider liking this video and also subscribing to my channel. It would really mean a lot to me. I'd also highly recommend you guys to check out and subscribe to Habo's channel. He actually showcased a very similar build on his channel about a week ago, which is very similar to the setups that I'm going to be showing in this video. So I'm going to be leaving a link to his channel as well as that video in the description down below. So there we go, over a minute I managed to do 6.95 million damage per second and a total damage of 417 million in a 1 minute rotation. So let's go over the setup that I'm using, and I'm going to be talking about the damage breakdown a bit later in the video. Let's start with the top solo DPS setup, which is also the raids build that I like to use. So for the skills for this setup, I'm using Rolling Surf, Squall, Flowing Strike, Crosswinds, and for the primary attack, I'm using Wind Edge. Now taking a look at the essence that I'm using. So let's first of all start off with the essence that I'm using for the Rolling Surf. So this is the new essence which we got, which is called the Skyparter. So this is an extremely powerful essence, probably the most powerful essence that we have currently for Tempest. And it reads that Rolling Surf now empowers your edges, causing you and your Zephyr's primary attacks to throw water daggers that return to you. While active, each use of a skill or primary attack grants you an additional dagger for each throw, and it also gives Rolling Surf damage increase. So essentially, this can give you up to 8 daggers, and I believe that because it's so powerful, its essence is actually getting a minor nerf in the next patch, which is going to reduce the maximum amount of daggers from 8 daggers to 7 daggers, but even so, I still think that this is going to be an auto-include in any build that needs to do DPS for Tempest, and I'm actually going to be using it in all the builds that I'm going to be showcasing today. So one thing which I want to say before moving on from this essence is that it's incredibly important in all of these builds to have 100% uptime of Rolling Surf. So if I just press this skill, you'll be able to see just how long it lasts, and you'll be able to see that I'll be able to cast it again before it expires. So this is incredibly important because you want to have the extra 35% movement speed that this skill gives, as well as also having the extra damage which it gives, which is an incredible amount of damage. So it's really important to have enough cooldown and enough beneficial effect. And in case you're still struggling to get 100% uptime of your Rolling Surf, then one thing I would definitely recommend is for you to switch out the chest essence to the merchant scale here, which says that Rolling Surf also conjures a Zephyr, and this gives you a 10% reduced cooldown on the Rolling Surf, which I believe is the only awakening from the current set of essences that we have for the Tempest that gives this 10% cooldown, and this for sure will allow you to reach the 100% uptime of the Rolling Surf with this essence. The good thing about this Skyparter main hand essence is that it makes it a little bit easier to maintain 100% uptime compared to some of the old Rolling Surf main hands which you had, like the Flooded Stream and this one here, which I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce the name of. So let's move on now to talk about the essence which I'm using for Squall. So for the helmet essence, it simply reads that Squall now marks enemies for 3 seconds before it erupts and slices through them, dealing damage equal to 28.5% of the damage you dealt to them while marked. This is also a very powerful essence, and it kind of has a delayed effect which does a huge amount of damage. For the chest essence, this essence can be a bit flexible, but the one which gave me the best result is this one, which is the Slippery Shell. So what this does is it says that Squall also increases the damage by 8% for 5.7 seconds, and this stacks up to 3 times, so you can actually get up to 24% extra damage after using Squall 3 times, which is really good. And for the last Squall essence which I'm using, it's the second main hand essence here, which is 1000 Dooms, and it reads that Squall now empowers you and your Zephyrs, causing your dash skills to deal additional damage to enemies and shatter their armor, which increases the damage that you take. So if we just take a closer look at Squall in the skills tab here, we can read more about this effect. So it reads that it will deal 31,000 additional damage each time you use one of your dash skills, which is very nice, and it also applies a 5% armor break, which can stack up to 60%. So basically this means that after you use 6 of your dash skills, you'll have the maximum armor break, which is a 30% armor break, which is one of the highest armor breaks you can have in the game. So this essence is actually one of the original essence which was released with the Tempest class, and the original effect of it was a bit buggy, so they completely reworked the effects, and I believe that now it's actually one of the most powerful essence for the Tempest class, so I'd recommend you guys to test this one out. So how this essence looks in action is that instead of Squall being a dash skill, it's now a buff skill, and this is what it looks like. So it does this circle around you, and you're actually going to have 100% uptime of this if you have the correct rolls on your gear. For the duration of this buff, all of your dash skills will deal additional damage, and you'll also get this armor break effect. So it's kind of important to note that when you do press Squall, is that you actually press Squall when you're kind of close in range of your enemy, because this does the circle here, and the enemy kind of needs to be in range of the circle, at least when you initially cast it, because basically you won't get the effect of the helmet, which gives you the extra 28.5 damage. So you kind of want to be in close proximity of your enemies when you cast it, because you want to get the full effect of Squall. So because 1,000 Dooms relies on a dash skill to provide the armor break effect, and Squall is no longer a dash skill, I decided to use a different dash skill, which is the Flowing Strike, with this United Defiance Shoulders essence here. And what this does is it allows your Flowing Strike to conjure one additional Zephyr, which means that it's going to conjure 2 Zephyrs, which is a really good effect, especially tied with the Pants Essence, which I'm using, which is the Wimp Promise. So this says that Zephyrs also increase your attack speed by 13.3. So just by pressing Flowing Strike, I'm able to get a 26% increased attack speed. And as for the third Zephyr, we'll be able to summon this from our passive skill, which is the Mistouched. So the Tempest actually has the passive skill here, and this one basically allows you to passively conjure a Zephyr just by attacking, and this is extremely good because you'll have the maximum amount of Zephyrs at most times, which is 3. So after summoning 3 Zephyrs, you're actually going to be able to utilize 3 times of this bonus, which works out to be 40% increased attack speed, which is just crazy for a single essence. So I would definitely recommend you guys to use this combination here if you want to increase your damage as much as possible. So finally, let's talk about the offhand essences which I'm using. So for the first one, I'm using Maroji Spine, and this one is kind of a no-brainer because this is a build which utilizes all 3 Zephyrs at all times. Then having the extra Zephyr damage, 28.5%, is incredibly good. And for the second main hand, I decided on using Hurricane Hitch, and this is for the Crosswind skill, and it reads that Crosswinds now empower your edges with wind, causing you and your Zephyr's primary attacks to unleash wind blades. So if we take a look at the damage breakdown over 1 minute, you'll see that Flowing Strike does 128 damage, which is really crazy. For the next 3 skills, Squall, Flowing Strike, and also Crosswinds, it doesn't seem like they're doing that much damage, but they're all working together to basically buff the Zephyr damage, which I'm having. And you can see the Zephyr damage is just crazy with 156 million damage. This is tracked in the miscellaneous section. Most of this damage is coming from the Zephyrs, and the Zephyrs are doing almost as much damage as what I'm doing. So this is why I'd really recommend for you guys to try this build out. It's the synergy which makes it so powerful, and if you look at the individual parts, it doesn't seem that impressive, but when you put everything together, the damage that you deal is actually really nice. For the set items, I've kept it very simple. I'm using 4 pieces of v2, which gives me the increased beneficial effect as well as the 30% increased attack speed. And for the second set, I'm using 4 pieces of Gloomguide's Prize, which will give me 15% increased damage for 3 seconds after using a dash skill, and also 22.5% increased critical hit chance. And because Flowing Strike has such a low cooldown, I'm able to maintain 100% uptime of both of these buffs. I will say that if you have very high critical hit chance and you're using more optimized gems than me, like the Rolling Consequence, the Mother's Lament, or even the Cutthroat's Grin, so for those of you in that camp, I would recommend you guys to switch out the 4-piece Glooms to 4-piece Grace, which works very well with this build because it provides you extra damage for every 5 hits that you do, and because this build has such high attack speed, you're going to be gaining a lot more damage using the 4-piece Grace. If you don't have 4-piece Grace with good rolls, then I could also recommend for you to use 2-piece Gloom and 2-piece Banquet, or maybe even 2-piece Banquet and 2-piece Shalbas. Those sets would work very well for this build, and in general, Tempest is one of those classes which are able to utilize a lot of different sets and still do a ton of damage. For the legendary gems, you can see my setup here. I'm not really going to spend so much time talking about it in this video. I've talked about it in other videos, but basically I'm only using auxiliary for the Svensons. I'm using Stormvault here, and for the Howler's Call, I'm using auxiliary Rolling Consequence. So what I'm actually going to do is talk about the most optimal gems which you want to aim for this build, and this is just my personal opinion, but I believe that these gems are actually very versatile and work with a ton of different builds, so I wouldn't regret going for any of these. So in order of most importance, I would say that Rolling Consequence is one of the best gems to use, especially for Tempest, because it procs your Firestorm and it also gives you critical hit chance. It's just all around one of the best gems in the game. For the second and third gem, I would say Bloodsoaked Jade and Bottled Hope I don't really need to go into how powerful these gems are. The fourth best gem to use here would be Gloomcast. This gem is just incredibly good. Because we're using primary attack a lot in this build, this gem just does an incredible amount of damage. We have to also remember that the Zephyrs also do primary attacks, which is going to synergize extremely well with the buffs from this gem. So that's it in terms of the 5-star gems for this setup. I believe that for the other 4 slots, you actually want to go for 2-star gems, and I think that this would maximize the amount of damage that you do. So for the 4 2-stars, I would use Paragon Command and also Fervent Fang. So these give you flat out damage multipliers. It might be a bit surprising for you guys to learn that I put Paragon Command here, but I believe that this is one of the best gems for Tempest. So if you didn't know, Paragon Command alternates between 2 states, which is the primary attack state and also the skill damage state. Because our Zephyrs are actually summoned by skills, they actually benefit from the skill damage, but they're also applying primary attacks at the same time. So they actually benefit from both states of this, which is why I believe that this gem is actually very good for Tempest. For Mother's Lament and Cutthroat's Grin, this is to help maintain 100% crit chance, and I believe that these two combined with Rolling Consequence is going to give you an insane amount of damage, and combining that with the Grace set, you could reach somewhere between 500 million and 600 million damage done per second, and you wouldn't even need that high resonance. You probably would only need somewhere between 2k or 3.5k resonance to achieve that result. So other than these gems which I've mentioned, there's obviously a lot of other different gems which you could use, which would still be great for this setup. So some honorable mentions would be Berserker's Eye, Carson's, or Everlasting Torment. These would be the 1-star gems. For 2-star gems, which I didn't mention, would be Viper's Bite, Igneous Scorn, and Pain Clasp. And then for the 5-stars, it would be Seeping Bile, Void Spark, and also the Warp Heart, the new gem which we got. For the curse properties, I'm using 6 pieces of Lashed and 2 pieces of Atrophied. I think for the damage test, I was using 4-piece Lashed and 4-piece Atrophied, but I think that this probably works a bit better. For the Reforges, this is what I decided to go for. So it's 3 pieces of the Vengeance set, and also Beneficial Effect Duration and Primary Attack Damage. This works the best for me. And for the Paragon tree, I went for 3 nodes here from the Slinger tree and these 2 nodes down here. Obviously, if you're playing open world farming, then I would recommend the Vanquisher tree here, or you could also go for the Brawler tree here for the increased size, which will give you the increased movement speed. And then for the legendary skill, I'm using the Lightning Node. For the familiar, I would recommend you guys to either go for a Brutalon or a Skitterite with the Lingering Wound skill, and this will greatly improve your damage. I see that a lot of people skip this and then they write in the comments that they're not able to get such high damage as I'm able to get, and this is one of the secrets which will allow you to get that. Another really good skill, which unfortunately I don't have on the Skitterite, would be the Ignition skill, which basically allows you to burn the target. And I believe that this is one of the best skills for the Tempest class, especially because the Tempest class has a lot of wind skills, but not a lot of fire skills. Having the fire burn from your pet, as well as the Rolling Consequence, is just going to maximize the amount of Firestorm that you do, which will greatly increase your damage output. So I'm just going to play a short clip of this build in action, and here I'm fighting the Ice Leviathan raid boss in Inferno 3, and for this raid I was roughly 500 combat rating under the fight. And I'll just skip ahead a bit into this fight where I actually managed to burst the boss down at the end. So here we go, this is the last phase of the boss. We break the Ice Crystal, and for the last 10 million HP you can see just how quick I was able to burst him down here. So now that I've gone over the DPS raid build, I'm going to quickly go over the dungeons and also the farm build, which are very similar to the DPS raid build. There's only a few essences which I've changed, which I'll quickly talk about. So for dungeons, the only change which I made to the build is to change the Thousand Dooms main hand essence into the Shriekworth essence, which is the Crosswinds essence. And this reads that Crosswinds critical hits causes 4 blades of wind to shatter off the target, dealing 15,000 extra damage to enemies they hit, and it cannot occur more often than once every 0.5 seconds. And this is literally the only change that I made. Everything else is the same. So you can see this build in action here in an Inferno 3 dungeon. So the reason why I made this change to replace Thousand Dooms is because I wanted Squall to return to being a dash skill. So the reason is that in dungeons you actually want a bit more mobility, and you don't mind sacrificing a little bit of damage. This build still does excellent damage, and it has all the core features of the DPS raids build. The only thing which it doesn't have is the extra armor break and the extra damage on dashes, but this is fine because now we have Squall as a dash skill, and it's still applying the helmet 28.5 increased damage, which is still very good on the dungeon. So now, as you can see, I'm just making my way into the boss room, and you'll be able to see how quick I can burst the boss down. The other thing is that this allows us also to have a little bit of extra AoE, because your Shriekworth allows your Crosswinds to have more range when it splits off into 4 different parts. So as you can see here, I decided to use my ulti just for a bit of fun, and it actually procced the Heliquary boss power, which I get from Vanguard. And yeah, I was able to burst the boss down really quickly. So now that I've gone over the dungeon build, I'm going to end the video by going over my open world farming video. So for the dungeon build, like I said, we have Squall as the dash, and we also have Stormwind. So you can see that for Stormwind, the dash is only one charge, and it's quite a short dash. So what I decided to do is to sacrifice a bit more damage for even more mobility. And this is what my farming build looks like. So obviously the Paragon tree is Vanquisher rather than Slinger. And I decided on using Breaker as the second dash skill, and this allows me to move even faster. And this is actually very similar to my old open world farming build. The only difference which I've used here is I've updated the chest, since we no longer need the merchant scale to maintain 100% uptime of the rolling surf. I went for the slippery shell, which I've been using in all the builds so far, and I also went for the new, like I said, the sky imparter. You really can't give up this essence. It's just such a good essence to have. So compared to the dungeon build, I've replaced the helmet with the unyielding vision. This allows us to deal even more damage with Rolling Surf, and it says that Rolling Surf critical hits cause an explosion of water, dealing 13,000 damage. And the reason I went for this is because I want more direct damage rather than having the delayed effect of the Squall helmet. And the other changes are the shoulders and pants essence, which are the essences for Breaker. So I went for the depth drawn, and this says that Breaker also increases your damage by 19%, which is really nice. And the other one is the Wave Rider, which turns your Breaker into a dash, and it says that Breaker now causes you to dash forward, damaging and knocking back enemies in your path, while also conjuring a Zephyr. So this will give slightly less damage compared to the dungeon build, but the damage is still going to be excellent, and more importantly, the mobility is going to be really good. You might notice that my sets are a bit different. I'm using Banquet of Eyes and Shalbas, but the reason for that is not really because of the effect. It's more because I wanted to have more optimal magic attributes, and I wanted to have the movement speed at 20%. So here you can see that unbuffed, my movement speed is at 20%, which means that once I press my Rolling Surf, I'm actually able to reach 55% increased movement speed. And just as an extra bonus, we are actually able to reach 70% movement speed bonus, and this is with the use of the Clandestine magic attribute, which I have here on my chest. So this reads that movement speed is increased by 0.3 seconds for 5 seconds after killing a monster, up to a maximum of 9%. So I actually learned this trick from one of Oroth's recent videos, and I'll be leaving a link to that in the description below, where he talked about all of the new magic attributes and how they have much higher potential than we first thought.
If every boy and every girl subscribe to Oroth's channel, subscribe to Oroth's channel.
So with this attribute, we're actually able to reach above the cap of what's normally possible. Because this magic attribute is in a different bucket, if you actually equip 2 of these pieces to get 18% movement speed, you'll actually be able to reach 70% movement speed, which is really good for classes like Tempest or Demon Hunter that actually struggle to reach the 70% movement speed cap. So right now I already have 1 of these equipped, but I was already able to feel the effects of this magic attribute. But obviously if you're able to get 2 of these, it would really push your build to the next level. The other thing is there's also these rush magic attributes, which are really good if your build has a lot of dashes. So in this case, we do have 4 charges of dashes from Squall and Breaker. And these are the dash skills which I decided to use. If you're able to get your hands on them, they will make your build just a little bit smoother too. So the dash skill cooldown recovery rate is increased by 0.1 for every increased attack speed. This build has insane attack speed, so we're going to gain a lot of recovery rate. And just like Clandestine, this is from a separate bucket compared to cooldown reduction, so you will be able to go over the 30% cooldown cap for skills. So I can see that with even more of these attributes, you'll be able to make your build really crazy. And the other one I have here is that dash skill cooldown is reduced by 3% when used after not taking damage for 3 seconds. This is also a really good one. So if you can get your hands on any of these rush attributes, they're all really good for this build specifically. I think that there's 4 affixes in total for rush, and they're all going to turn this build into a speed demon. I just haven't had enough time to farm all of these affixes yet, and I'm sure that some of you will be able to achieve even more impressive results than I've had here. So that's about all that I wanted to share for this one, guys. I hope that this video has been useful. So I've shared the farm build, dungeon build, and also the DPS raid build. Do try one of these builds out, guys. I'm sure that you'll be happy with the results. In my next video, I'm probably going to go over the Vanguard and the support builds, which I like to use for the Tempest. So if you don't want to miss out on those, then do consider subscribing and turning on notifications. But for now, I'm going to be signing off, and I'll see you all in the next one. Peace. And this essence here, Shard Duth, Xard Duth, Shob Lazul. Oh, for God's sake, I give up.